Thank you for joining us tonight. Welcome to Vesta Divorce. The webinar tonight is Divorcing After 50. I'm Renee Coleman, and I'm so glad to have you here with us. Our Vesta mission is to provide education, connection, and support to help you navigate the divorce process with clarity and confidence. We celebrated our 13th year recently. Vesta began because the three founders wanted a better experience for those going through divorce. Even though they were in the financial world, they still realized that there's not a lot of information out there to help those. So that's why they created Vesta Divorce. Today's session is focused on key considerations for your divorce after a long-term marriage, a topic that likely feels overwhelming, but one that's critical to ensuring your future, your stability and peace of mind. So we've got a great group of professionals on the panel tonight, and they're all going to share their expertise based on tonight's topic. None of us works for Vesta. We are all independent professionals, but we volunteer our time to do these webinars every month to help educate you. I encourage you to stay engaged, take notes, ask questions, participate in Q&A, and help us make the session as relevant for you as possible. With that, I'm going to introduce one of Vesta's concierge, Mandy.
Thank you so much, Renee. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the New Hampshire Hub event, Divorcing Over 50. We're going to get a lot of great information tonight. Probably going to feel like you're drinking from a fire hose. That's okay. Take a deep breath, like Renee said. Get a piece of paper, a pencil, take some notes. And I put a calendar link and a telephone number in the chat. I would love to schedule a time to speak with you. It is really an honor and a privilege to be able to walk on this path with you. I've gone through my own divorce 18 years ago, but I can pull up that feeling like it was yesterday. I look forward to learning more about you and your situation and helping you build a roadmap forward, whether that be working with this entire amazing team or a handful of people based on your situation. And I look forward to learning more. Thank you.
Thank you, Mandy. And one other thing that I will mention, the legal portion of tonight's presentation is based on New Hampshire law. So we are a New Hampshire hub. We have two presenters tonight that will be talking about New Hampshire law specifically. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Adrienne to kick us off tonight.
Okay. Welcome, everyone. My name is Adrienne Boulogne. I'm a psychotherapist and a coach, and I'm also a divorced single mother. And I've also divorced after a long-term marriage, so you're in good company. And what I do now is I've really dedicated my work to helping singles, couples, and co-parents navigate through relationship distress, relationship recovery, reinvention, and certainly all around divorce, before divorce, after divorce, moving on, etc. What I wanted to speak with you tonight is a little bit about the pieces of how you came to this moment and what is unique about divorce at midlife. And really, the number one thing before we jump into all the other pieces you'll hear tonight, I wanted just to point out how not unique it is, just how common it really is. People that are over the age of 50, that's 36% of divorces right now. It's a lot. And if you're over 65, divorce has tripled since you may have gotten married in the 90s. It's tripled since that time. What we can call gray divorce is really being called a silver lining at this point. Gray divorce is no longer something that is frightening, scary, unfortunate. It is all those things. It's a major life transition, but you can really look at this as a silver lining in a lot of different ways. And the reason for that is that there's a lot of information out there and life proof out there showing us that the quality of life is really becoming more enjoyable after decisions of divorce for people that are over 50. Quality of life can improve. We have longevity that we can look forward to. Oftentimes in our 50s or above, we have a lot more stability in our life that we've gained along all of our time. And we have growing independence in so many different ways where divorce is really a new reality that's much more possible or less daunting in a lot of ways. What else is unique about divorce at midlife is a lot of us are dealing with maybe being grandparents if we started our families early in our lives. but some of us are having kids that are young as well, whether they're our grandparents and we are the primary caretakers, I'm sorry, our grandchildren, we're the primary caretakers of them, or our own children that we've had later in life. So that's a unique thing that's going on right now. So you may be in very different realms. Career shifts at 50 are very common these days. 24% of people over the age of 50 are thinking about pivoting to their next career venture. It's not always a time of slowing down, although it could be for some folks. Women today are the initiators of 70% of divorces, and this is represented in all of the different cultural shifts that we have right now. And of course, there's challenges. So there's always going to be challenges. If you have had a long-term marriage, you're getting divorced after 30 years of marriage, you're disentangling an entire full life that you have built with someone. And you're looking at assets, you're looking at the building up of all kinds of memories and ways of life and things you've gotten really familiar with in your identity. And I just realized I have a typo there, your identity. And that is a lot to pull apart and change and think about changing. So that's a challenge for sure. The cost of living right now is a challenge for sure. It's one of the things that gives people pause, even when they see the silver lining. And then, dating, right? Dating is a daunting thing no matter what stage of life that you're in. It can be particularly scary thinking about dating when you're over 50. But I'm here to tell you that it's actually not any scarier for people over 50 than it is for people that are 20. You just might need a little support around that. So, the different kind of shift I want to represent here is really that this can be a midlife awakening. It's a different way to think about what happens to us when we're thinking about divorce after being married for a long time or being at this point in our life. And a lot of it has to do with the self reflection that naturally comes about during this midlife period of our lives. We're thinking about the nest that we're in. We are sometimes experiencing an empty nest. If we've had kids that have moved on, things are different. We're taking inventory of our lives and our relationships in different ways, looking at the different roles that we've served. If you've been a parent or a certain kind of dedicated parent to certain kinds of functions, that may be something that you've kept your head down and focused on for a long time. And things may have been really freed up in recent years, thinking about the change of that, the responsibilities you have, and that's given you a chance to consider more things for yourself. Personal growth, extremely common at this time. The midlife awakening is all about thinking about yourself, wondering who you are, who you will be, who you once were, and trying to figure out if that really aligns with you. And often our relationships is a huge piece of what determines that for us. And that's one of the major reasons why people are thinking about divorce. We also have health and longevity in front of us. Like we have so much more to focus on around how can we have a vital, healthy life going forward. It's not about slowing down. It's not about giving up or changing. It's about how are we going to live the next half of our lives in the way that we want to. And we feel a lot of energy and vitality around that. We also have hormonal changes around this time. And the hormonal changes can cause us to have a new clarity on what it is we really need and what we need to be focused on. And that's a major feature that shows up. Value alignment is a big piece of what people are thinking about around divorce, after divorce. For women, a lot of times they're thinking about equity issues that they've struggled with. For anyone, thinking about the authenticity of who they are and whether or not they've really been able to realize that in the relationship that they've had. For men, a lot of times emotional capacity is a major area that they would really like to understand better as they're going to be looking at single parenting and providing a different way of showing up that maybe they had practiced in the past. That's all work that can be done in the kind of coaching that I provide. Relational trauma. Getting divorced is traumatic. It's complicated, but many of us have had situations that have led to the divorce that are quite traumatic in themselves. And relational trauma really lends an opportunity for us to develop relational intelligence. So, this is like a growing field of work. Like I mentioned, I'm a psychotherapist, but I really put that knowledge and background into teaching people about learning about their own relationships to themselves and the way that we attach to others and the way that we seek understanding about ourselves in relationships. And that relational intelligence is an opportunity in the divorce process to learn about the experience we had and the experiences we want to have going forward, how to make those changes. The practice that I run, it's called Better Half for that reason. So the midlife point is so common for this kind of reflection and transformation that Better Half is the concept behind the work that I'm doing because it really starts with us stop. The intention is really to stop searching for someone else to be your better half and for us to feel like we can become a whole self on our own. We can become our own better half. And relationships from whole self consciousness is the goal. And that can happen inside a couple dynamic, it can also happen individually and for the future. A lot of the work that I do around divorce, which I'd be able to help you with, is sorting out co parenting and how to navigate that. Thinking about your own transformation. How are you going to move through this and heal? But how are you going to become something different? And think about the legacy that you really want to have for the second half of your life. And this is something that can be done with partners as they move through transitions and maybe start a new relationship together. Sometimes you can have a relationship that needs to die in some ways and it needs to be reinvented. The same two people can reinvent and start anew, or people can do this as from going their separate ways. And that's the part of the opportunity that we offer here is that we are a connected group in this hub and we can work as a team together in order to give you what you need. You have a mature life that requires a full professional team. So to have all the different people with the different expertise working together is going to just feel like we can make a roadmap for you that's interconnected and you can move forward in that way. A lot of the inspiration that I get is from Carl Jung, and he's famous for saying the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And I hope that resonates with all of you tonight. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Adrian. And next, we're going to turn it over to our legal team, Kate and Laura.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kate Blake. I am a family law attorney. I'm licensed in Massachusetts and New Hampshire. This is the New Hampshire hubs. When we talk about substantive issues, that will be specifically related to New Hampshire. When we talk more about like the process options, that is something that may have commonality between different states depending upon where you're living. My practice encompasses helping people through out of court resolution. So I do mediation consultation. So like when people are mediating with Lori, I will give advice to one of the parties, help them review information, make sure that they understand the agreement that they're signing, and then ultimately that gets filed with the court. And then I also am a collaborative attorney. I do direct attorney negotiation, and a component of my practice is in litigation as well. Lori, do you want to introduce yourself now before I jump in?
Sure. Sure. Hello, my name is Lori Barron. I'm also an attorney. I'm licensed in Massachusetts, New Hampshire, and Connecticut. Like Kate, I also do, besides mediation, I also do collaborative law, estate planning. And as Adrian said before, we all work as a team. And so we provide you with not only options on how you want to go about your divorce, but the support that you need once you decide which track you want to take. So I'll get into more about mediation in a little bit. I'll let Kate take over and talk to you then.
I think what's important to, regardless of where you are in your life getting divorced, I think it's important to talk about different divorce process options so that people understand it's not a one size fits all kind of thing. We need to make sure that people understand what is going on in terms of the different options in order to file for divorce. In New Hampshire, you can file an uncontested divorce or a contested divorce. And in order to file an uncontested divorce, you will need to work through an agreement with your spouse. And that can be done through communicating directly with your spouse and coming to an agreement, mediating, which Lori will describe, collaborative law, which Lori will describe, or and then the other way to file is actually just filing with the court a petition for divorce. That is starting a court process. In New Hampshire, you file that petition along with some other paperwork with the court. It's a formal court process that actually has to be served on your spouse. Once that paperwork is served on the spouse and the court is aware of that, they will issue a first appearance hearing where you and other people who have recently filed come to the court without attorneys to really be educated about the court process and then encouraged to go to mediation. And you can either do mediation through the court, they have court-appointed mediation, or you can do private mediation with someone like Lori. I personally think that private mediation is better. You get a lot more time and attention from those people. And usually the private mediators are a little bit more skilled in their capacity to help people get divorced. Before I let Lori talk about mediation and collaborative, what I do also want to say about the court process litigation is that it creates a structure for doing discovery. Once you file, you have to exchange financial affidavits within a certain period of time. There is also a Rule 1.25a mandatory discovery that needs to be completed. And then when you have an open litigated process, you can do other discovery like asking for interrogatories, which are written questions and requests for production of documents from the other person, or you can obtain discovery through subpoenas, which is basically a court order to a third party to produce information for you, just so that you're making sure that you're getting all of the information you need in order to make informed decisions. The vast majority of cases do settle at some point along the way. Sometimes, though, they do need a court process, whether it's for discovery or temporary orders or to get some feedback from the judge. And then my final point before I turn this over to Lori is that just because you are in a litigated process doesn't mean that you may not end up going to mediation or collaborative. There are other ways to resolve your case. So it's important to work with a professional who understands the different processes and can guide you through them as they may be necessary. So, Lori, if you want to talk about mediation collaborative.
Sure. Okay. To piggyback off of Kate, yes, they're not, mediation and litigation, they're not mutually exclusive. You can use one, you can use the other, or you can use both in tandem. So one of the benefits of mediation is that it keeps you out of court for the negotiation part of it. The court process is very daunting. It's very anxiety producing. It's very stressful. And as Adrienne pointed out in her presentation, people going through a gray divorce, 50 and over, are facing unique challenges that she described. And it's because most of them are very long-term divorces, marriages, there's a lot of history. There's a lot of things to deal with. So going through the court process can not only be emotionally draining, but very anxiety producing, which can cause a lot of mental health and physical issues to happen related to anxiety and just medical health. A lot of older people over 50 have high blood pressure issues, have physical conditions that can be exacerbated by going through that whole court process. So one of the benefits of doing a mediation is that it's out of court, it's a lot cheaper than litigating, but doing the mediation, you're still going over the same issues that need to be addressed for a divorce to be approved by the court. So you're not giving up any of your rights to have a fair and equitable settlement. You're just doing it in an environment that's more conducive to where you are in your life at that point. Doing your divorce in court, it's public, it's open. Everybody hears and knows about certain private things that you may not want to be known by everyone, but it's an open courtroom setting. So there's other people that are going to know the intimate details of your marriage, especially if you're fighting over certain things to justify why your argument should win. So mediation offers a private setting to address those same issues, but not open to everyone. So it offers a lot of benefits, and we at Vesta work as a team. And so, as Kate said, she consults with people who are going through mediation, because a mediator cannot give legal advice. Even though I am an attorney, if I were the mediator, I couldn't give legal advice. What I can do is I can tell you what the rules are and help facilitate your conversation to come to an agreement that you both are comfortable with within those rules. But I cannot tell you what's best for you. that would be a place for Kate to advise you on what your rights are. So it really is a team. And again, doing mediation, you're not giving up any of your rights to a fair result. So it's really good considering all the things that are going on and specific to that time in your life, age 50 and over. It really is something that should be considered because it helps reduce the conflict. It helps you not only get through the divorce, but it helps you be in a place where you can transition and move on in a more peaceful way, getting all the support you need from either a divorce coach or other professionals just to help you get over that hump. And you can do it without feeling like you've had PTSD, like you get PTSD from the trauma of going through litigation. And it's true. It is a very traumatic experience going through any sort of litigation, family divorce in particular, and especially when you're older and you've had a very long-term marriage. But those are the benefits of mediation. Collaborative law, I always like to refer to this, and Kate, correct me if I'm wrong, but I always like to refer to it as a hybrid between litigation and mediation, because what it is, it's still an out-of-court process where you agree to sit down and work through the issues outside of court without litigation, but you have your attorneys present with you. It's a team approach. So your attorneys are there. It's still you and your spouse having the conversation and working through the issues, but your attorneys are there. The CDFA or the CDLP is there. So there's a lot of professionals during the sessions. So it's a more structured environment. This is really meant to deal with divorces that are either have more conflict or very high net worth, where there really needs to be a more structured environment to ensure each of the parties leave with a fair settlement that includes a really good analysis of the nuances of high net worth. Again, it's less expensive than litigation. It is more expensive than mediation because there's more involved, but it is an alternative to the litigation process. And another thing that has all married couples really, but specifically individuals 50 and over have to or should consider when they're going through their divorce is their estate planning after their divorce. It's really important for not only for their own well-being, now that they're not married anymore, they're pretty much, there's nobody under the law that can step in automatically to be there or get their money. So it's really important that even during the divorce process, individuals over 50 need to address the estate planning component of it and how their current divorce settlement would impact their estate afterwards, especially high net worth. So it's definitely an added component that is much more important to recognize and at least talk about during a gray divorce than other types of divorces. And I think that really sums it up. Divorces over 50, they have unique challenges that divorces for people who are under 50 don't. So it really is beneficial for individuals who are going through that to really seek out and utilize all the resources and tools that are out there to help in this particular specific area of divorce.
And then the only other thing I would mention here that's on this slide is the Vesta divorce process, which really is this team-based approach that you'll hear each of our speakers go over, that we're all experts in our own area. And when I first started practicing law a long time ago, there were no mortgage professionals who specialized in divorce. And I wasn't able to make these connections to make sure that people understood what they were signing and making sure that they put in the language that they needed into an agreement that they could comply with. You shouldn't be putting into an agreement that you'll refinance a mortgage within 30 days because that's just not going to happen. So you want to speak with somebody like Renee and work with her to make sure what it is that you can safely agree to so that you're not putting yourself in a position where you can't comply with a court order. If we could have the next slide. Thank you. So we also wanted to go over more substantively the law. So this is where it gets more into specifically New Hampshire. And I know that Barb is going to get into this a little bit more, but we just wanted to identify it at a very high level. So, particularly in divorcing with people over 50, it's spousal support will be very important. Spousal support is also called alimony. In New Hampshire, it's based on a statute that essentially says that alimony is going to be 23% of the difference in people's gross incomes. Alimony is designed to help somebody maintain a marital standard of living and is potentially something that needs to be addressed. Child support in New Hampshire, children are emancipated once they turn age 18. So if you do have children under the age of 18, then child support will need to be calculated. It's based on a formula. You put in certain information and then it tells you what the number is, and it's a presumption that number is going to apply. And then in an agreement, you want to make sure that you identify other child-related expenses beyond the basic food, shelter, clothing that child support covers. So uninsured medical expenses, extracurriculars, how are those going to be shared between you and your co-parent? And then in New Hampshire, all assets, regardless of how they were acquired, when they were acquired, or whose name is on it, is considered a marital asset. New Hampshire is an equitable distribution state. Equitable does not mean equal, but generally, the longer a marriage goes on, the more likely assets are going to be divided approximately equally. So if you are in a longer term marriage, I would start with the presumption that assets will be divided equally. And I know Barb will get into more of this because one of the things that's very important to understand is that not all assets are created equal. Retirement account is different than real estate is different than a brokerage account. Anything that I missed, Lori, that you wanted to go over?
No, I think you pretty much covered it.
Okay. And then just some other kind of high level things that we want to address is medical insurance will be very important if you're under the age of 65, identifying who has the medical insurance and whether or not that other spouse can remain on that policy. If there are financial obligations, so alimony, child support, that type of thing, then usually there's a requirement that a spouse maintain life insurance as security for those financial obligations. Legal fees, generally, as a rule of thumb, both of you will be required to pay for your own legal fees. Sometimes if somebody spends more than the other, there can be some equalization of that. So that's something to keep in mind. And then sometimes we like to talk about myths. There's no such thing as abandonment in New Hampshire. Sometimes I'll have people ask me, do I have to continue to live together during this divorce? The short answer is no. If you don't feel comfortable or do not want to continue living with your spouse, then you don't have to. There are some implications in terms of personal property, getting back into the house, parenting time that you really should consult with an attorney, but leaving the home does not mean that you lose any rights to the value of the house being divided. Anything else that you want to mention, Lori?
Just getting back to the cost, talking about the costing again, at this stage of your life, cost and your financial future and security of your financial future is one of the predominant issues that you're dealing with. Not so much custody. True, you might have children that are under 18, but a vast majority of the great divorces, especially 65 and older, hazard to say that they don't have minor children, but your financial impact of the divorce on you is key. Again, looking to minimize the costs of the divorce can help maximize your future stability. Mediation, collaborative divorce are avenues where you could reduce costs now to help you later. So I just wanted to highlight that.
Okay, so I think at this point we're turning it over to Barb.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us on our session devoted to post 50 divorces. I think when you start looking at dividing financial assets post 40, there's not that much difference. Dividing assets is dividing assets, but over 40 does have a unique set of circumstances. And you really must consider that equitable does not always mean equal. Post 40, you really need to consider equitable. So, for example, if somebody has left their job given up their career to take care of the family and someone has worked and then they want to go back into the workforce, but they're set back for 10 years. That has certain financial consequences that really should be addressed when you think about the asset division. And then as far as post 50, what you're looking at, you have similar assets, but it's more the composition. So you've had more time to build up a significant amount of equity in a home. You've had more time to build up retirement assets that aren't exactly the same as equity in a home or cash or brokerage assets that you might have. So sometimes one member buying their spouse out of the house can be challenging because of how dramatically housing prices have increased. So you may have a lot of equity and then you may only have retirement assets, and the two aren't exactly equal. So when you look at the assets that you might have, you really have to look at the tax implications of these assets that you have. The other issue that you should really consider is age differences. Spousal support generally stops when someone reaches the age of 67 or retirement age, whatever that might be. Right now it's 67. So what happens if one person's the non-working person that's receiving support, if they are 5 years younger? So we need to think about what are the sources of income going to be when someone turns 67 and you're only 62? And what I like to do is I help clients, then maybe you should get more assets as part of the asset division. If your spouse makes significantly more than you do, that would be another reason maybe we would look to try to quantify why one spouse should get slightly more in assets. So I work with clients trying to build support for how can we build equitable settlement that may not be just taking the pie and dividing it in half. The other thing we have to consider that people have to realize is you have much fewer years working to rebuild those retirement assets. So you may have this perfect financial plan that you've been building, and you now have to throw it out the window because your retirement plan has been cut in half. That could have a consideration. Then the next thing I want to go over on the next slide, and something that Michelle, if you could or Renee, flip. Yep, great, thank you. Something that really I don't think gets enough priority that I like to help clients with. So if you leave with any knowledge that I can give you today, it's really talking about Social Security. And this would be when one party leaves their career or maybe works part-time to help out more with the family, with the home, and another person their career has risen. When you're working from home, although you're working full-time, taking care of children, taking care of the home, you're not making income and you're not paying into Social Security. So the spouse that has been working all along, paying into Social Security, only they will receive their full benefit from that money, even though you've been maybe supporting the family. So I drew an example. Mary's been working. She's been making a good living. Jim has stayed at home, taking care of the family. So Mary has made such a good living. She will receive the maximum retirement benefit of $40,000, which is great. It's still not going to be everything you're going to live on, and so as a spouse, if you've been married more than 10 years, you are entitled to your Social Security or half the amount that your spouse has gotten. So even if you're divorced, you're still entitled to getting half of that amount. So Mary gets $40,000, Jim gets $20,000. So if you add that up, even over 10 years, the difference is $200,000. And this is something where if you divide the assets in half, and let's say the couple's 67, and we're going to divide our assets in half, it's really not equitable because let's say you have $1 million in retirement and
then Mary gets 500,000, Jim gets 500,000. But Mary's going to be able to supplement her retirement assets with 40,000 a year in Social Security benefits, and Jim's only going to get 20. So this is something really important to consider. Even if you're in your 50s and you get divorced, Social Security is based off of 35 years of income. So they'll take 35 years of whatever income you have. If you don't work, let's say you only work 25, that means 10 years of income, you're going to get a zero. So it's going to be really challenging. Even if you say you have 10 years to put into Social Security, the chances of you overcoming those years that you didn't work are slim, and maybe you'll make half, but it's still something that once you are over 50, it should be part a consideration for every divorcing couple. And it's something challenging, and it's not something that many family law attorneys, it's a financial nuance, it's a bit new. So I highly recommend bringing in a CDFA and someone that can help you work through possibly what ways can we try to equal out this Social Security payment. And so now I'm going to hand it over to Robin, who's going to talk about post-divorce.
Hi, everyone. Nice to be with you tonight. Thanks for joining. So my name is Robin Young. I own North Star Financial Planning. I've been doing this work for over 30 years. And really, one of my specialties is helping my clients through the post-divorce process. And Barb had just talked about, creating a settlement agreement that encompasses a lot of different financial assets. And my job, really, my role in the process is to take all of that information that's in the settlement, the divorce decree, and help you create a financial plan for your future that will be sustainable long term, that will help incorporate some of the things that Ariel was talking about earlier. You're putting that next stage of life in an ideal world. What would you want your life to look like? And how can we create a plan for your future so that you have confidence, financial security, and a strong sense of financial well-being? So the first place to do that is to unpack what you have access to now. What are your assets? What is your income? Knowledge is definitely power. The first step is to look at income. So you may have gotten some alimony, pension, you have some Social Security decisions to make. Potentially, if you're not retirement age yet, you have some decisions about work and investments. And we would really incorporate all of those income pieces into a financial plan to help you understand, are there things that need to change? So am I getting enough alimony that it would support me over my lifetime? And my family pension, if there are any options on when you can take the pension or how you can take the pension. Social Security, you may have some options. You take that early versus waiting. I'll go through that in the next slide. And then investments, how much should I take out now? Do I have access to cash? What is needed for my investment portfolio for me to have the paycheck that I'm replacing from my prior life? So those are the income components that we address in the planning work that we do. Expenses, you're going from a one household to a two households. So your personal expenses are going to increase, potentially your health insurance, taxes, and many other things that you're managing on your own. And I just want to say that one of the things in this work is that this is a huge transition, and how you feel today, personally, emotionally, may not be how you feel in a year from now, 5 years from now. And so one of the things that we do when we're creating this plan is to pause on things that aren't a priority, things that you don't need to make a decision on right away, and really give you some space to explore your options. Like you might have decided I want to keep the house, but after a year's worth of maintaining the house, many women and men decide that they want to downsize, especially if you don't have kids in the home any longer. There's lots of different circumstances around how we can bring emotion to these decisions, and taking some time to identify what it is that you're really anchoring to in your life and what's important to you. Asset allocation, a lot of you had identified investment as something that you were wondering about. With settlements, a lot of the assets that come to people are in cash because they're coming for retirement plan. So that cash is not, it could, a lot of times you need to reinvest that in something to be able to protect yourself over the long term from inflation and to have your money grow. Coming up with an asset allocation that fits the financial plan that we've created is an important component. I had a lot of cases recently where there's been a lot of growth and risky assets and that have moved over from the settlement. And the timing of selling those, because of your risk tolerance and what you need to create a paycheck over your lifetime, is definitely not the same as the circumstance where you're growing and have an ability to replace the FSE. So that's one of the unique things about age 50 and above is it's just less time. Decisions are definitely more permanent and it's harder to rebound. So going slow with some of this and making sure you understand impact of some of the decisions that you're making. And then risk tolerance, understanding your own risk tolerance. It's not going to be any good to invest. If then again, you want to sell if there's the downturn. So spending time on seeing what you need for growth in your financial plan to fund your lifestyle over your life. If you need to work, if you need to save, maybe you need to save some of that alimony that's coming to you now and reinvest it. Maybe you need to add to a retirement plan. So there's lots of levers that you can pull to make your plan successful to help you build the confidence that you need to create that financial security. And then the last thing on this slide is dividing retirement assets using Quadro. You do have the opportunity when a Quadro is initially happening to take money out of a retirement plan if you're under age 59 and half without penalty. So that is something that you know about. You need to know that it's something you need to fund. So if you have an income gap, maybe and you're young, maybe some additional income for retirement assets. So that could save you a retirement penalty, a 10% penalty on taxes, which can be important. Understanding the tax situation. So I work together with CPAs, the estate attorney, the Barb, and the attorneys so that hopefully there is already somewhat of a plan in place to move forward here with your financial plan. But I did want to talk, I know Barb just talked a little bit about Social Security. These claiming decisions that you make really do affect your lifetime income. So just want to go through the rules quickly. So if you can either get 50% of your ex-spouse's Social Security benefits, or you can pay your own benefit, whichever is higher. If you call Social Security, they're going to do that math. But to be eligible, there's the list. As Bart said, you have to be married 10 years or more, 62 or older, and not married. And to get 50%, you have to wait to full retirement age. We do have the option of claiming earlier at 62, but you get a reduced benefit. And if you're working, there could be some reduction in benefits. So it's definitely a pause. See what works in your financial plan, what your cash flow is, how it would impact your taxes before you would move forward here in deciding which planning strategy to use. Option. So for your own benefit, you can delay until you're age 70, which can significantly increase your lifetime income. And if there's worries about longevity and your portfolio lasting your lifetime, waiting to 70 could be a good option from an income replacement standpoint. The next one. So I want to talk a little bit about health insurance and Medicare. So Kate did speak a little bit on this, but it's one of the things, one of the big decision points, I think, for people. I've had a lot of this lately where there was prior health concerns that were on my spouse's insurance plan. Here in New Hampshire, if you're not on that plan, and you don't do COBRA, you have to use actually doctors. So there are a lot of nuances with these plans that I would highly recommend. And we work here at my firm with health care consultants. They're free and they can really help you unpack your options.
And you want to look at whether you can have it, if you're working, you might have access to your plan, you might be able to go on Cobra. Well, it's a 3-year as a life change, so 3-year program, or you would have to go on the marketplace until you're age 65. Do not stay on program once you're eligible for Medicare because there are late penalties and rolling late penalties. So you don't want to do that. Oh, kind of seeing steam and Medicare. Sorry about that. Age 65. So you do want to apply for Medicare when you're age 65, 3 months prior. You definitely want to meet with a health consultant if you're not savvy about these things, because there are a lot of options and there are, again, some restrictions depending which plan you have about going out of state. Definitely find a resource for that, and I'm happy to use that and happy to provide a couple names to some people that we work with. But Medicare is an individual, not marital thing. And if you miss the enrollment, we know it definitely can create permanent penalties. You don't want to do that. But you do want to be aware that once you're on Medicare, your premiums could go up if your taxable, your income basically is high, over 109,000 if you're single, filing single on your taxes, you start to have a premium increase. Again, it's that holistic approach about making these decisions, not in a vacuum, but considering your cash flows, your tax situation, your overall financial plan, so that you can make good decisions that create financial security and help you with your assets last your lifetime. Just as an FYI, long-term care costs are not covered by health or Medicare insurance. So that's something that you may have to plan for an insurance policy outside, or it's through another option like building your asset base. That's it. So I'm going to turn it over to Laura Gamache, who's going to talk about selling. Thank you.
Thanks. That was some great information you guys are getting. So sure your heads are spinning. So I'm going to keep it a little bit shorter and sweeter, but just some kind of key topics like really just to touch upon in regards to the home, right? So a lot of kind of emotional feelings can be really evolved around the home, especially if you've been living in this home with your spouse, soon to be ex-spouse, for some time, had the kids grow up in it. So it can be very emotional of the options that you have in regards to this. Of course, if the end result will be selling of the property, a lot of times I'm working very earlier on with the attorneys because as you guys are negotiating in regards to the divorce, is really need to know just the value of these assets. Of course, just understanding what that looks like, but also now just looking in terms for what the steps are going to look like and what the next step for living arrangements will be and what those will look like. If you're downsizing, selling the home, really what are your needs? Where do you want to live? Where you want to be? What can you afford? And then of course, just contingencies that might need to be needing to make your purchase obviously subject to your property selling, right? A lot of people are taking the funds from their home and that's what however that it's divided upon in regards to the agreed upon divorce and then putting that into the next purchase. Are you going to be renting? Are you going to be having some type of short-term interim? So variable types of situations, that having those conversations as early on as possible, especially in a market where we are here in New England, things can move very quickly. I am licensed in New Hampshire and Massachusetts. Sorry, my little quick intro. However, I have close colleagues that I work with throughout the country. So if you're here locally or if you're not here locally, I can still put you in some good hands in regards to for someone that in a different state if that's necessary. In regards to preparing your home, like I said, getting that market analysis, right? So just knowing what your property is worth, and we'll touch a little bit more upon that in a moment as well. But the timing of the market, right? What type of market are you in? Obviously, right now we're coming out of the longest historical cyclical of incline of the real estate market. Here in New Hampshire, the average price is over $500,000, right? So when your average sales price of a property in New Hampshire is $525, obviously Massachusetts much higher than that. But just keeping things in mind of selling the market and then what's the next steps after that. Also, I'm working a lot with preparing the home for the market, right? So a lot of the times it's been a stressful time. If there's the divorce has been lingering, has the home maintenance items have been put to the side, right? So for now, we're looking to sell the property. Do we have some maintenance items that need to be done in order to really increase the value? Because of course, both parties, they want to sell it for the best top dollar. Do we need to do some things and invest into the property? So I really work earlier on with parties, and a lot of that handling in the middle. Have to talk directly to your spouse. I will step in and take that off of discussion and kind of that mediary, so to say, as it comes in, as we're discussing around the house. You're not having to talk directly there. I can also step in. There's many different ways, but we keeping everybody, communication is key. So every party is all on the same page and what needs to be done, and accounting for all those financials that are put into the house, if that's the case. So moving into the next slide, also in regards to, yeah, thank you. If someone's going to be keeping the family home, Renee will touch more on this one. But a lot of the times that's someone's knee-jerk reaction is they want to keep the home, right? And in many cases, as we touched on that Kate mentioned, is that having a crew like us, our team, is making sure that everyone's all in the same length of what's realistic timeline wise and what can realistically be afforded. Can you afford it if you're going to buy out your party? So also keeping in mind, if you do that, now you're going from that they touched upon capital gains, just in regards to now you're going to be single. If you look at some point, obviously selling that property down the line in regards to not a married couple. Know what you're buying. Again, there comes a lot of just maintenance items, utility costs, taxes, etc., that people need to really just account for, making sure that they know what they're buying if they are looking to purchase that family home. Financing options, and again, Renee will segue into that. And then again, the market analysis versus an appraisal. So when they look to turn to us to show them what's a market analysis, know what the home is worth, real estate agent, real estate broker, such as myself, we do that typically complimentary, don't charge a fee. And we're getting a market range based on the closed comparables here. If the value of your property home is, or is a big disagree, they want to hire an appraisal. So they'll spend $700-800. There comes a price tag with that to have an appraisal done on the property where that person comes out and will deliver a 40-page report on the market value. So a couple of different options. Still, I definitely see people do both because they can't agree on a price. Sometimes they can just, they do agree with that, with having a market analysis done, but those are just the differences of the price tags that kind of come along with it. So again, the earlier pull us in, the better. This helps segue the whole transition all along. Please reach out with any direct questions. I know that things can vary to wherever your location and wherever you are. So please reach out. I'm happy to answer any questions. So I'll pass you on to Renee. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Laura. Again, welcome everybody. I am Renee Coleman. I am a residential mortgage lender and also a certified divorce lending professional. And I'm the founder of Divorce Mortgage Planning of New England. So I do help my clients understand all of their options, especially tonight for our topic. There usually is a home involved with a long-term marriage. And the biggest question that we get asked, can I keep the house? There's lots of things to consider. My clients will come to me and they usually have that idea in their heads that they would like to keep the house. There's some work that we have to do up front to understand what comes with that, right? And so most people don't realize if there's a mortgage on your house, usually we see both parties on that mortgage. And so we have to figure out who can keep the house. Lenders don't just say, sure, we'll take spouse A off and spouse B can keep it and take over the mortgage. There is something called a mortgage assumption, which your lender has to tell you whether they allow it or not. And that is basically taking over the mortgage and removing your spouse, but you still have to qualify for it. So they won't just automatically say, sure, spouse A can keep the house and take over the mortgage. They're going to make sure that you qualify for that. So talking with a lender early and understanding what your options are is going to be super, super important in this process. We've heard multiple presenters tonight, and most of us talk about working as a team. And the reason for that is to understand all of your options, right? So Laura can help you understand the value of your house, and the attorneys and mediators can help you understand how that might be split. And myself and a financial advisor can help you understand what the numbers look like And what does that look like for your financial future, right? It may not be the right thing for you, but by having all of the numbers and understanding, we can help you make that decision. So can I refinance the mortgage? That's what we're going to look at is from a big picture perspective, what is involved with the refinance and do we qualify for that refinance? So some of the financial considerations, the value of the home, which Laura talked about, right? There's options is how do we value that home? We have to value something before we can split it. We have to understand what the numbers look like before we can understand how we're going to split it. So again, a CMA or an appraisal. And you're going from one household to two, right? So there are certainly financial considerations in that and tax implications. So Laura mentioned this as well. We talk about tax implications. We're fortunate, right, in New England that we do have a lot of equity in our houses. But when we're talking about taking over that mortgage and you're the spouse wanting to keep the house, we want to talk about the capital gains potential that you would be responsible for. And then, of course, retirement implications, right? Where Barb and Robin can have those conversations with you. Next slide, please. Thank you. So when we're talking about qualifying for a mortgage, there's a few criteria that a lender is going to look at. The first one being your credits. As you're going through this process, we know that you've got a lot on your plate, right? We need to make sure that we understand what debts are in your name and who's going to be responsible for paying them pre and post divorce. And so we help you navigate credit in general and understand what debts are in your name so that they can be addressed with your attorney or mediator in your final settlement. But during this period, your credit is going to be so important no matter what decision you make about the home, whether you're refinancing the home, assuming the mortgage, whether you're going to sell and buy something else, whether you're going to be renting, all of those options require you to have a good credit score. And so we can help you work with that and understand that. And you may not be the financial person in your household. You will be going forward. But for the time being, make sure you understand what debts are in your name and make sure that they're still being paid on a monthly basis on time, because that will have a very big impact on your credit score. The other thing that we will look at to qualify you is your income. And we have lots and lots of options. So most people don't realize that, you may not have a job any longer, right? If you're in a long-term marriage and you may not be working any longer, you might be retired, but we can still use pensions, annuities, Social Security support. We can use all of those incomes to help you qualify for a mortgage. There's also a program called an asset depletion program, where instead of using income to qualify you, we look at assets to qualify you. So post-divorce, what we might have in investment accounts or retirement accounts, we can use those to help you qualify for a mortgage. And there are loans available for seniors. So in New Hampshire, you have to be age 60 or older. And there's a program where we can access the equity in the house and use that particular loan program to pay off or buy out the spouse who is departing the home. So again, there's lots of options. And that's what we're here to help you with. I'm going to put my information in the chat. I also have a divorce guide that I've written that you can download for free. So check it out. And if you have questions, feel free to book a call with me. And next, I'm going to turn it over to Michelle.
Good evening, everybody. So I go last. As a certified divorce coach, I can work with you to help you bring all of that together. That was a lot of information. It can be very overwhelming. And while I'm not a lawyer or a CDFA or a therapist, I can still help you bring all that together, make it seem a little less overwhelming. We can talk about the emotional pieces, which I'm going to get into. And as everybody has mentioned, building that support team, whether it's working with one of us, two of us, but one of the key things when you're either in divorce or preparing for divorce is building your support team so that you have someone. As a divorce coach, I walk side by side with you the whole way. contemplating divorce, what does it look like? What resources might you need? What should we consider? And then even post-divorce, when you get back to that qualified domestic relations order, sometimes how do you go about it? How do you get a resource for that? And that alone can be very anxiety producing. I spend a lot of time making sure people get the right resources to get their quadras done in the end. A lot of this on my slide has been talked about, what things to consider. But if you are considering divorce, if you're thinking about it, we talk about, what does that mean? How do you tell your spouse? How do you tell your kids, whether they're 16, 26, or even 36? What does that mean? How do you tell them? How do you even tell your family? And what happens after you initiate the divorce process? I think everybody has gone over some of the post-divorce considerations as well, but one of the things is loss of family and friends. Unfortunately, it does happen. We're 45, 50, 60, and your in-laws, your brother-in-law, sister-in-law, nieces, nephews, they're all part of your family for so long. How does that affect you? And we talk through how it feels and things that you can attempt to do with family and friends, and how it can feel isolating. And so as a coach, I'm someone you can come to talk through those feelings, to talk through how you're feeling about keeping the house. What does it look like? What, emotions might you have tied to the house? And going into this, I work with a lot of people. I actually specialize working with people in long-term marriages and run a couple of different groups. And I did ask them if you were to give people advice. And some of what I got was, don't involve your kids no matter how old they are. They don't want to be the go-between, even if they're 26 years old. They still take it hard. I know just a couple months ago, I said something clearly wrong, and my son took it the wrong way and got very defensive for his dad. Your needs are going to change through this process. I think someone already said, we talk through that. What might it look like? Your kids might be 20 right now living at home, but 2 years from now, they might not. What does it look like to keep the house? And we were very talked about some capital gains and things in the future. Is keeping the house a short-term thing or really a long-term goal of yours as we're setting goals for you? They told me, the people I asked, interview, if you're going to hire an attorney or even a mediator, do a lot of interviewing. Together, we consider, what does it look like potentially your divorce? What route should you potentially take? Mediator, collaborative law, lawyers. And we can talk about what kind of questions to use to interview those lawyers, especially for your needs. And I'm going to get into it a little bit more, but taking the time to heal and to grieve after a long-term marriage relationship, there's a very big grieving process that most people don't understand. And that's why working with someone like Adrienne or myself, we're here for you. And we understand it's a grieving process. Your best friend may not understand, especially if, I don't know, say there was infidelity. They may not understand why you're grieving something like that. Maybe they were like, oh, you're way better off. That's not something that coaches say. We're here for you to let you talk about whatever it is. It's a grieving process. The loss of your life partner, the loss of the life that you had planned, even if it's financial, the home. Geez, you've been saving up for a vacation to Hawaii, Italy, whatever that plan had always been for retirement. Time spent with your children, even your grandchildren, can change. And what does that look like? How does that feel? Kids in longer term marriage, divorces, they're older, they have their own thoughts, where they want to live, where they want to spend their holidays. And unfortunately, even at an older age, they can still be influenced by the other adult. So what does it look like a little bit afterwards? Get a therapist. I highly recommend it. Join a support group. I do have one for people in long-term relationships, and I do run one just in general, a peer support group where people come together and talk about how they're feeling. And sometimes it's a little bit, asking a couple people for their advice on legal things, but it's usually about, I feel lonely. How do you handle feeling lonely? join a church group, get out there with people who share the same common interests you have. Find things like this Thursday night, I'm going to a trivia thing. Get some people together and go find a hiking group. Those are all great things to do. Take care of yourself. It's a time to be a little selfish. It's you. Maybe this whole time, 30 years, you have been a mom, a wife. You had a certain career. Maybe you're changing a career. Maybe your career is the one constant still in your life at this point. But figuring out who you are and going back to even things maybe you used to enjoy or that you stopped doing because you had the kids or because your spouse didn't enjoy doing that. And a big thing is setting new boundaries. Boundaries are for yourself. They bring you peace. They're not necessarily being mean. But when we are separating and divorcing, your spouse is going to have a different level of access to you, and you'll have a different level of access to them. They're not your go-to person, unfortunately, anymore in most cases. You may even text them happy birthday and not get a response because they have set that boundary with themselves that they just aren't going to answer certain texts like that, unfortunately. And like I said, connect with people with common interests. Adrian touched a little bit upon dating, but just take the time, you guys. It's not a rush to get out there. You're setting new boundaries. You're getting to know yourself, becoming, I think even Adrian said it, becoming a little bit whole with yourself, and just take that time. And I think that's all I really wanted to say today. So we got a lot of great questions in the Q&A. If you have any other questions, please go into the Q&A and let us know.
Thank you, Michelle. I will mention there is a question on there about the groups that you have. If you have a link, go ahead and put it in the chat so that I can share that. And thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. You have no great questions, and I appreciate your time, and hopefully you got some good information. As a reminder, the concierge team from Vesta will be reaching out to you in the next day or two just to check in and see how you are. If you had any questions about the presenters tonight or any of the information, they can also help connect you to us if you need that. I know on our screen right now is the information, contact information for us, but the concierge can also help you with that. So thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight, and we look forward to seeing you on another Vesta webinar. Have a great evening.
Thank you. Good night.